Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Maps Are Dead with Mike D. I'm Mike D. Good to have you here. These are conversations about strengths-based development, figuring out how to make decisions when in a world that has run off the maps. How do you decide when no one else can tell you what to do? Okay, today's episode is a special episode. Damon Goddard isn't just one of the top strength conditioning and performance coaches in golf and sports. He's also a very old friend. We studied together. We've taken road trips together. That's where I discovered I fart in my sleep, I think, because he's like gave me shit about that quite a bit. 17-hour road trips from Tennessee to Michigan. I think we've even spoken at high school assemblies, like way back in the day.
We've spoken in many groups. We actually need a road trip following us on some of those college road trips and speaking gigs.
The old days. But here's the thing. Damon has gone from training way back in the day to now training some of the absolute very best golfers and baseball players and tennis players in the world. But here's what I love about Damon and his expertise. He doesn't just figure out how to meet you where you are and kind of give you a map. He's like, hey, what do I need to do to give you the strength to navigate your own life without a map, to navigate performance when there's no one else in your head? And so we are going to have a conversation about the decisions that shaped his career and also, his company, which is Goddard Sports Performance. Like how you build a company that I was asking about his actual tally, Damon, right? I mean, 80 plus wins between the PGA and LPGA. And within those wins, you had clients that have like 3 majors that include like the Masters, the Open, the US Open. And like, that's just the golf part of the world. And so, and you're coaching people outside of pro sports, but that's quite a list in Goddard Sports Performance. And we'll put the links to all of this in the bios and the notes. But I know you well enough to know that this didn't just start because we ended up with a degree in PE. Like when we started, like from a little teeny tiny school in Tennessee in 1997, right?
Yeah.
To the Masters. I remember texting you the day your client was hugging you at the last hole of the Masters. I'm like, Damon, you're on CBS right now. Like from that to there. So I'll start with you and your decisions. How did you get here? Like what are things that stand out to you, decisions you had to make to start you on this journey?
No, I tell you, Michael, number one, awesome to be talking with you. As always, you're one of my dearest, most amazing friends. And yes, you probably have all the skeletons in the closet for me. So I'll dance delicately on this. No, listen, gosh, it's funny when you asked me to come on a podcast and I started thinking about when we met to where we're at right now. And it is funny when we start talking about decision making, and I look at some of those pivotal decisions, even from, we mentioned college, and thank goodness that trig-based physics was so darn difficult for me that I dropped it and changed my pre-med major completely to, the whole exercise physiology thing, because I knew, and this is really interesting, when I was 16 years old, I knew exactly what I wanted to do based off of an incredible trauma-based injury that changed the trajectory of even my soccer career, right? And so somehow those decisions made me fall into this small school, even though it was very intentional, in Tennessee in these foothills, of the Smokies. That point, changing my degree, knowing exactly where I wanted to go in life, working with athletes, but I didn't necessarily know, was it on the medical side? Was it on the rehab side? Was it on the sports performance side? And when I made that decision to go into the sports performance side, it was based off of, I was done with my career with soccer. I had exhausted my body as much as I could. And I just leapt into number one, going, okay, it's sports performance. And my father was a football coach for 40 years, and he was an amazing football coach. So I saw the impact that he had with the athletes. And it wasn't just a coach athlete relationship. I mean, this dude just made the most amazing impact on individuals. And I was like, man, that is a gift, right? And so thankfully I had a model that I could work from. I had an idea of what I want, where I wanted to go. And I honestly didn't know how to do it. You know me well enough I don't sit on decisions very long. I can pretty point to 2 decisions where I sat in too long, but I don't sit in decisions, too long, because I know that action begets everything, right? I can sit there and be very indecisive and make these small cuts, but they're just going to be dull and very edgy. or I can be very decisive and be very clean and direct with the direction I'm going to go. It wasn't necessarily just kind of fly by the seat of my pants either. It was very intentional. I started with the sports performance side. I knew I wanted to work with football. I know I had hockey as well. I wanted to work with athletes, and that's who I got
Yeah.
right from the get go. And, was blessed to work with some amazing pros. And then it was really interesting. You and I talk about this a lot, is one of those pivotal decisions that changes trajectory for careers or for life, honestly. And it was really one decision where, I'd been in the sports performance world long enough to understand there were some gaps in particular sports. You had the NFL, you had, soccer was dabbling in it. A lot of these other sports were really integrating sports performance and what that actually meant to elicit the best out of an athlete. And then there was really one sport where I kept coming back to, and you know me well enough that man, I hadn't swung a golf club much, but
I don't remember you. I don't. That's what's fascinating. I don't
at
remember you doing golf at all, and I'm like,
nah,
crazy.
I know, and I actually really remember this decision. I looked at the sport, and it was the surgence of Tiger, and he was
Mhm.
winning literally everything, and he was looking like a linebacker doing it, and everyone was a little bit of a torn between like, you can't lift in this sport because you can't swing, and I'm like,
Yeah.
but wait, Tiger literally just won everything last year. But the only information that was out there at the time was rehab, and there wasn't, proactive, performance based information. And I took a look and I was like, man, what if there was an opportunity to insert myself in this particular sport and, maybe potentially blaze a trail
Mm.
of integrating the performance piece, because we had the model of a guy like Tiger doing it, but not be so reactive in the therapy, but
Yeah.
actually proactive in the performance piece and actually really develop these athletes. And what I've seen over, gosh, I mean, I've been doing this 26, 27 years.
Yeah.
When I made the decision 20 years ago to jump into the golf side, I mean, from A to today, Z, if you will, I mean, the information that we've been able to develop over the 20-year span has now leapt over so many other sports in terms of integrating the data and the research and all this stuff that it takes to develop an athlete. And no one really understands the rigors of, the golf is, you see PGA, somebody's just swinging a club, and you maybe hopefully do it for 4 days, and they go, oh, that's
Yeah.
cool that they're playing a hobby. But man, what they're not realizing is, one, it's the most biomechanically unsound movement to do. It's like a small car crash every single time you're swinging a club, but you're also not taking into consideration, wait a minute, they just had to practice 4 days in a row. They had to travel. They've got a new hotel they're staying in or a house they're staying in. They have to change their entire nutritional ideas around where they're at, right? And so
Yeah.
it's really interesting. The rigors of the sport, it takes a lot of consideration just from the performance side, but then you also have to have the recovery side and being very astute to that. And so there's a lot of nuances that come into the sport. The decision that I made, quite frankly, listen, I like to be a business guy as well,
It's
right?
business.
You take a look at the lifespan of these NFL guys and NBA guys, and you're
Yeah.
like, man, they're in that for maybe 3.5, 4 years on average. And then you take a look at the golf side, and they're, potentially going to be in it for 8 to 10 years. And I'm like, well, I like repetitive income, if you will, predictable income, but I also like longevity.
Mm.
So I saw that opportunity twofold. Is one, I can insert myself and potentially blaze that trail of being the performance guy. And there were some others doing it at the same time. So we were able to collaborate quite a bit. But two is really just, it was kind of an opportunity piece where I was like, listen, I've got an opportunity to work with an athlete for a very long time, develop them over a period of time. And, on the non-pro side, I got
Mhm.
clients from 6 to 96-year-olds with a little bit of disposable income, right?
Sure.
So it was kind of a simple business decision, but I didn't go into it blindly. I think once you make a decision to pursue that, then at the same time, you're like, you can't just manifest yourself as the guru. You actually
Right.
have to do the dirty work to become what you are saying you're going to try to be, is the best in the business. Well, you better surround yourself with really good information and absorb as much possible to then start putting all the dots together. I would honestly say that decision beget a really fascinating, beautiful, it's so tapestriated and experiential stuff. I mean, I've got to see the coolest places in the world, deal with some of the coolest athletes. And even then, it's just it's been such a fun career
Hmm.
that has really treated me really well. And I reflect on it quite a bit. I'm like, man, I feel lucky in a sense, but at the same time, I'm like, man, luck is a byproduct of being prepared.
Right. Exactly.
And I did the work, and I
Yeah.
can actually rest my head at night and go, you know what? Yeah, you did do the work to get there. So I
Yeah.
can't just say I was, lucky in a sense.
I think that's important. I think that's, and again, for those of you who can see, like, Clifton Strengths is one of the things we do when we talk about strengths interacting and things. So I wrote Damon's themes, which belief, intellection, developer, input, and learner. Is it what I love in the midst of what you're talking about is this idea of I gathered good information. Like I remember us having a conversation the first time in Texas where you're like, yeah, dude, I'm going to do golf. And you telling me, and that it's very obvious now that this is a good idea. We're 20 years in, but at the
Right.
time you really were having conversations and you weren't working with the PGA pros. You didn't
No.
start there. Like, and so the ability to go with, three thinking themes, intellection, learner, and input, which are gathering information, really being core about what is the core piece of data. But what's fascinating to me, what I would love to know too for yourself, because it's about using your strengths other times, is that if I took developer out of that mix, I know people who have thinking themes who just think endlessly and they struggle to get it out. But what's fascinating about developer, Gallup has found that some of the highest performing elementary school teachers all have developer in their top 5 because it's the ability, in their words, to put in the core foundational elements first. And in fact, I've heard developers say, for me, I'm like, that's such rudimentary pieces. I want to get to the impact at the end. But developers will say, like, oh, I love teaching second graders how to add. And I'm like, what do you love about it? And I had one teacher say, because I'm curing cancer. And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, this little girl won't be able to do chemistry if she can't add, and she might cure cancer. So teaching her the fundamentals of accounting to me are key. And developers take ideas and then go, okay, you want to win a master's multiple times. You want to win every major in your sport. Let's start with you can't touch your toes.
Right. Yeah. And
You know what I
that's
mean? And that
the,
developer part of you is your gift. It's your ability to break that down. What will cause you to go from thinking to action? Because if you think about it, have you ever had moments where you get stuck in the thinking loop? And so the question becomes, what is it you've learned about yourself that, you know what, I'll start to think. And before it runs away, I go, wait, I have to have action and progress. Developers are all about action and progress. Have you found what it is? Is it family? Is it future? What are the things that turn off the thinking and gas pedal the action?
yeah. I honestly, and it's something that I've always done from the beginning. I don't know if it was necessarily an innate quality. I'm sure it is an innate quality, but I mean, I remember even playing when I played soccer. I mean, the night before every match, if it was a home match, I would go to the stadium, and this was before all the visualization, all this stuff.
Sure.
I was giving myself the space to actually see the game and see it develop and see the nuances, how the flow would go. And lo and behold, I would find myself many, many, many occasions in that same game. Actually, I have already addressed this situation in my head the night before. And so to take that and to go, okay, as a developer, if you will, is like, I've got to set the foundation, right? And it's kind of funny is one of the quotes that we have for our company is sharpen the axe, right? And so it's the whole, Abraham Lincoln, if give me 6 hours of, to cut down a tree, I'm going to spend the first four
Mm.
sharpening my axe, right? So what that tells me and what that kind of embeds with the athlete is, hey, listen, we are going to, yes, put on, potentially put on the green jacket, but let's go a million steps before that. And listen, if you can't even touch your toes, that's an issue. So we've got to set the foundation first and then earn the right to do the bigger things. And so I think, from my position being in the performance coach standpoint is like everyone really, I don't validate my job from being able to beat somebody up in a workout. That's so easy to do. I can make somebody sweat, puke. I can do that in my sleep, right? But give
Yeah.
me a guy that has riddled with all kinds of different movement inefficiencies that is really impacting at a very high level how to extrapolate the 1% out of that pro athlete. Now it's super, super easy to take an amateur and give them 25% improvement. But when they're playing at the highest level, man, it's so hard to get
They're
that
separated by
1%.
percentage points. The winners are separated by minuscule moments.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, when an entire season is quite honestly boiled down to one putt in one event on a Sunday that then changed the shape of their trajectory. I mean, that's one putt, dude, right? And
Yeah.
so think of how many strokes that they've had over the season. So the little things make a big difference in how you put things in order to have the progression for development to reach that pinnacle point where they're ultimately very prepared for that time because they've already been there and can sit and dwell in that confidence of going, I've done the work to put myself in this position. Now I can make an easier decision of just going, this is my line, this is where I'm going to put it, and they sink the putt.
What progression have you seen in getting people to understand this? Because when I think about, you said something a minute ago that was like, I'm like, oh crap, that's exactly right. When you were thinking about physical performance, where you're like, a lot of what was going on in golf at the time or in sports was rehabilitation and recovery. And I work in the mental side of with sports as well. And I've done stuff with your team over the years, like your in-house team.
Yeah.
And for me, I always say, like right now, mental performance in sports psychologists are acting like sports therapists, where they're like,
Yeah.
oh, they're mentally broken. They can't hit the baseball right now. But we're trying to go, hey, visualize who you want to be when you pull in the driveway at home at night, not at the mount, not at the plate,
Yeah.
which starts with how you got into the dugout in the locker room, which started with whether or not you got your massage in time and your ice. Like, and we're trying to get them to proactively think. But you're describing something now that's more and more, but athletes are very aware of, hey, I'm great. I have an innate ability to do a thing, which is why I'm here. To proactively go, I have to plan to be great, not
Right.
just hope I don't need to be fixed.
Right.
And how do you get them to shift? Is that happening now? How much education is going into the mental shift of, wait, I should build, not just plan for repair?
Right. And it's funny is, when you start to take a look at, I've got a great friend, Dr. Ara Supai, he's a brilliant doc. And he always talks about building the resilient athlete, right? And so the real resiliency is that fulcrum. And you have the performance piece and then you have the recovery piece. And everything has to be in balance in order to have a very resilient athlete. And so when you start to understand that process of getting the athlete to shift the mindset of being very process oriented. And listen, it's not, oh my gosh, I didn't hit my cold plunge at 4:30 in the morning. Did we actually hit the cold plunge today? Right. It's not being so regimented. However, it's ticking the check marks on, okay, did I do what was required of me to reach the level of where I want to be? And that's very simple tasks. Is like, did I do my mobility work? Did I do my myofascial work? Did I,
The
I'm
foundational
checking
elements.
the foundational elements that are very basic, very, very basic. But the problem is a lot of athletes, quite honestly, when we start talking about getting into that mindset, a lot of the athletes, they don't own the basics. They'll skip a lot of the basics and then anticipate them just going to the range and executing these amazing shots. That's great. Yeah, the range work is good, but that's practice. All the stuff that we did before is to prepare for executing shots on the range and then executing shots on the course. What happens is when I show up to the range and warming up and getting ready for the tournament, is a lot of guys are trying to find their shot, right? They're like, oh, I'm hitting a draw today. I'm hitting a fade today. Oh, okay, well, this is how it's going to work. that's a backwards thought process because then they're reacting to what's happening immediately before an event, right? And
Mm,
then their mindset shifts, and they're like, "Oh, well, I have to change a little bit of my mindset in order to then execute it on the course." Where if we had the fundamental elements of a really solid warm up, all the physio work, all the, cold plunge and the nutrition, do a little breath work as well. We're doing all of this stuff to now, when I show up on the range, I'm executing the shots that I intend to take out onto the course because I've already prepared for this madness, right? It's like
yeah,
showing up to to a battle and going, oh my gosh, I don't even know what weapons I have today,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And
And that's what,
and
and
so
I feel like my clients do the same thing where they show up for decision making without having prep for decisions.
yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, and that's an exercise in futility because then it becomes a very frustrating cycle because when you're in that decision making opportunity, and I haven't done the fundamental, even just let's call it just self care stuff. Like I haven't even mentally taken care of what it is for me to exist that day. uh, how am I anticipating to make decisions over, I've got 5,000 employees that really depend on me showing up that day, and making very difficult decisions. If I haven't prepared for that, even on the minute level, I think we're really setting ourselves up for potential, disaster, making a potentially incorrect decisions. At the same time, though, is there's going to be times where, you know what, we're not going to be prepared today.
Yeah. That's where muscle memory kicks in if you've done the fundamentals though, right?
Well, and it is very funny to me is, I'll use, and let me actually correct some things, is we always use that kind of muscle memory thing, right?
Yeah.
And to be quite honest with you,
It's crap.
muscles and tissues
Don't
don't
don't have memories.
memorize anything. It's this thing up here, right? And
Right.
so what we're doing is we're building these motor patterns.
Hmm.
What people don't realize is motor patterns don't go away. We just have to then reconstruct a new behavioral mechanism to build a new motor pattern. And then we get frustrated when an old motor pattern shows up. It's going to show up. That's the way we function, right? But here's I'll get a little nerdy
Go
and
for it.
be able to translate it here. Is motor patterns, when we've developed a motor pattern, let's say, you had an injury, when you're 16 years old, you broke an ankle, right? Uh, and if you didn't address it correctly, then you're going to change the way you walk, or what we call gait pattern, right? And so, yeah, I'm going to come up with a little bit of a different gait pattern. We don't realize how that little thing, when we didn't address the rehab, how it impacts us 15, 20 years down the road, because the brain is really smart. It says, okay, I know I still need to execute movement. Man, that ankle's doing something really weird. So now I've got to recruit other things in order to execute a movement. And so we build these compensations in order to what we visualize is supposed to be a good movement. But then we're riddled with all these, motor
Hmm.
inefficiencies that create compensatory movement. But here's the problem is and everyone gets surprised, whether that be a business, whether it be a relationship or whatever, we always get surprised when the compensation actually has an expiration date. Always.
The
And
tool
it's
that
gonna
worked, the tool that got us through our childhood is not the tool we need when we're 30 and 40.
definitely not, man. And so that's the thing is compensations always have expirations dates. And so that's where it is very healthy to then kind of understand the pathology of, and I'll use movement, understand the pathology of movement or pathology of how we got here. Is it right or wrong? Who cares? That's just where we're at right here, right now. What we
Hmm.
need to do is actually address what is creating that inefficient movement in order to then move forward with better efficiencies, because number one role in my world is to reduce the risk of injury. And
Yeah.
that's where someone comes in and I go, hey, listen, I need to, let's take you through all these testing patterns, all this stuff. And then I go, man, this is a compensatory movement that is going to potentially lead to a particular injury. And so that's where I think this is really fun, even in, decision making in business and relationships and just how we operate is we never really kind of sit back and go, what are those compensatory movements that I'm using right now that are impacting how efficiently I am making a decision down the road?
Yeah. Like, is that what you're saying? what's so fascinating for me is because you're talking about something very key. Because a lot of the research will say that our dominant patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior, which specifically show up as Clifton Strengths themes, that they show up, they're really kind of set between birth and 25. And so what I'll tell people a lot of time is your brain basically, you have the peak neurological capacity at age 3 years old, right? We have the most neurological capacity. And then after 3, it's use it or lose it for the rest of our lives. We can make new neural pathways, but our brain is the most alive because it's figuring out the world. And so you're developing these thoughts, feelings, and behaving in some ways to survive the first 25 years of our life. And then we promptly move out of our parents' house.
Right.
And I'll meet people who are reacting to their boss and CEOs at 30 as if they're their dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, and so in some ways, to your comment of compensatory, these actions, these emotions that are meant to help grease us and get us through life have an expiration date. I wouldn't say to how we use them. People's strengths, the biggest challenge they face is they don't learn to use different ways or different tools. Or instead of reaching for, I'm just going to believe what I always believed you would believe, I'm actually going to go, I'm going to still have things I believe in, but I'm going to be more thoughtful. I'm going to gather data with input and learner. And I'm going to prioritize actually, instead of being right, being somebody who's growing.
Right.
Like the growth of growth versus belief. You know, that's a big deal. Like that's you changing the mechanism in some ways in your brain.
100%. Yeah. And that's the way, and every athlete that I work with poses a completely different number of inefficiencies. Right. And so the hammer I use on, this particular person, I can't use a hammer on literally everything.
Right.
I have got to have a bigger skill set, bigger toolkit. And so how are you building a bigger toolkit in order to then operate one as an employee or as a boss or a spouse or partner? Whatever it may be, how are we going to build that toolkit a little bit better? And I think that once again is separates the good from the great. They have a bigger toolkit to then go, okay, I know what particular tool to use with this particular inefficiency, and then that's how we start to operate very effectively in different scenarios. And so, to use your example as a 30-year-old working with the CEO is like, hey, listen, I can't operate the way I used to. Now let's shift gears and be very deliberate on how I then particularly operate with my boss or whoever it may be. That's a toolkit. And some people are very, I mean, it requires work, dude. And we're a work
we have
averse.
jobs.
I mean, that's honestly what keeps us busy. People are work averse, and I'm okay with it because, quite honestly, I get work averse as well in a lot of
course,
facets of my life, right? And so that's is a very funny thing. Is like whenever I do identify an inefficiency in my life, I go, okay, what's the tools that I can use or acquire in order to operate better in this particular scenario?
Because I mean, what you're talking about in that moment, right, is this idea of we have to, we constantly are going to be growing and we constantly stepping into it. And the growth part is that figuring out, I think you have to have a reason to grow. I think we struggle with making that shift. And so vision ends up being a big piece of that. But I think one thing I wanted to ask when I think about athletes, and because I want to actually talk about some of your non-athlete clients and the crossover and some of that, is that one of the things I'm noticing though, is that people more and more, it's a topic of conversation, the disconnect between their mind and their body and their unwillingness to listen.
Mhm.
That integration of it more and more, where they're still playing games in their brain, they're still making decisions, they're planning their future. And again, it could be outside the sports world, and they're not listening to, hey, I'm your body, I'm burned out, I'm tired, or you aren't 20, or you're not treating this, or you're still using this limp and you shouldn't be, to your language of performance. And how important and what mechanisms are people using to go, I can make decisions because my mind and body are listening to each other and they're integrated.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes a really simple thing. Is like we've lost the art of listen to the whispers until they become an actual scream, right? And so that's where even myself, I'll use myself as an example that gives a broader explanation for my non-professional athletes. I mean, I went through an event, well, I don't know, 5 years ago, where literally almost kicked the can because my, large intestine had a massive leak in it, and then I had to have 10 inches of it, taken out, and then, I mean, it was just so, a subsequent five
Life
mass,
impacting.
five injury, 5 surgeries later. But here's what's funny is like, man, that was kind of an outlier thing, right? Well, I don't know why that happened. Stop. That was a story I told because when I actually give a little bit of hindsight, I'm like, dude, I did not listen to the whispers that my body were giving me to say, hey, something's a little awry. And so when we avoid the pain or avoid the discomfort, whether it be a conversation or whether it be, a situation that we're in that we know we shouldn't be in, or a decision that we probably know we need to make, or, it is interesting because those are those small whispers until it becomes a massive scream of a situation that, you can't get out of. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is difficult. Or I just, tanked an entire company based off of a rational decision. And so I think when we're talking about the mind body connection with the non-professional athlete, I love using the tools of movement because one, we've lost the art of movement. When's the last time? This is why I ask a lot of my, older guys. Like, hey, listen, when's the last time you actually just sprinted? Right? They're, oh my
Right.
gosh, I have probably 30 years ago. I'm like, listen, man. Movement is medicine. I'm not asking you to go run 100. I just simply want you to go for a walk, right? But it is interesting is once you start building, progressive framework with the individuals, they start to have this very cool awareness of where their body is in space and time. And one of the biggest feedbacks I get is like, man, I've never realized that I can move that well, or man, I never realized that particular muscle. I'm waking things up, right? And the nice thing with my world in golf is like the byproduct is, if you move better and move well, the byproduct is you'll become a better golfer, right? And
Yep.
that's what's really fun with my work. Having somebody and listen, when somebody walks through my door, I am extremely humbled because how vulnerable is it for somebody
Right.
to give you their body and go, please do something with it, right?
Right.
And I have to honor that. But I honestly have been in that same position where I'm like, hey, doc, here is my body. Save me and let me
Mhm.
live. Um, it's a very vulnerable position. I find, however, we avoid those positions a lot when we think we're vulnerable and we have been conditioned where we think it's weak. And I attest that so much because I think vulnerability really opens the door for massive strength. And when, you and we've had some very powerful and very vulnerable conversations.
Yes.
You and I have been able to keep it real for over 30 years
20
now.
plus years, 30 years.
And it's funny is when we can sit with a little bit of vulnerability and
Mhm.
understand I need to work on this, then I think that opens up the door for, let's just say, my, CEOs or whatever. When they're coming in and they're vulnerable enough to give me their body, I have to do something with it and honor them by giving me up my A game. They have to show up with their A game. And now it becomes this mutual dance where it's really fun. Essentially, all I'm doing is making them realize their capacity to do bigger things, right? And we're crossing up these small little thresholds. And once I create another threshold, then they surpass that. Then they start to really go, wait a minute. I've really undersold my ability to actually just move. And then where does that translate? They understand those thresholds in business. They understand the thresholds in their relationships. They understand those thresholds of just how they're behaving, even on, with their friends. They understand now I have the capacity to then break past a lot of these thresholds that I just avoided for so long.
Mhm.
That then once I've done that, then I increase my capacity to do a lot bigger things professionally in my business with maybe it's simple gratitude work every day, whether it's, learning new things. I think we've avoided, and I know we're kind of going off a little bit.
No, you're good. You're good.
I think we've avoided becoming multidimensional, right? We're so focused on, I want to run an optimal business and become a millionaire. Well, what do most people do in the process is they neglect their body,
Yep.
they neglect their, their being or understanding there's, a world bigger than them. They neglect, learning things. They become one or two dimensional, but they don't understand if I push things even just a little bit, I don't have to push things all at max all at the same time. But if I push things at the same time, then I become a very well-rounded CEO that is in touch with my fitness, that is in touch with being incredibly grateful for what has got me here. I am in touch with my partner, spouse, kids. Actually, I have a relationship with them. Weird. But wait a minute. At the same
Oh,
time,
right.
my business is crushing at the same time. And so I think it's fun with the non-professional athlete to help them realize if I tap into my body and do some bigger things with that, what else can I tap
Yeah.
into that I haven't been able to tap into? And that's what's cool. Because there's that aha moment. They're like, oof, I've played small. Let me go a little bit bigger in other arenas of my life.
Yeah. Because I love my favorite coaching question when I watch someone do that, where you're like, wow, they realized they overcame something, is to ask the question, hey, what is it you believed before that you've now changed? Is there anywhere else in your life that you believe that?
Yeah.
Is there
Yeah.
is there anything else that your brain right now is telling you that you remember, hey, 6 months ago, you didn't believe you could ever do burpees of X, Y, and Z, or you didn't believe you
Right.
could do 18 holes without a cart, or, or whatever it
Yeah.
may have been, to get to that point where you're like, hey, what else is it that you believed that if you simply had vision, time to think, and small wins to incrementally commit to growing, that can be changed? And so I think you're right. And there's a great power in that. What I love about you, though, which is so brilliant to me, I want to ask you a personal question about this, is your belief developer, and I've seen it from the beginning in our 30 years, is that those around you, we kind of borrow your belief in us until we find our own.
Mhm.
You do this whole thing where you're like, yeah, I'm like, no, but I can't do it. You're like, well, that's because you haven't made the step small enough yet. And you naturally tap in and it just kind of comes from the inside. And you have such conviction about us, those who
Yeah.
know you, we feel that. Is there a moment you can think of professionally where you're like, it was a gift, and I'm so glad to be able to been here when this person became the thing I knew they could be in their head. Like where
Uh,
you got to be present for. And so, because I know you don't own that for you, you're very hands off. But there's this quiet moment where you're like, wow, I was
yeah.
here for this person's growth, and I saw them from the beginning, and here we are now.
Yeah. No, I can name one particular thing that I'll try to keep it together with the story because this was one of the just coolest moments. I was working with one of my athletes since he was 16 years old, right? And now we've 15 years into this process. And so, this athlete was killing it on the junior circuit, won the US Junior Am twice. I mean, you knew he was going to be something special. However, to in even on my role is to instill the self-belief of yes, winning the US Junior Ams is really awesome, but do you honestly believe that you'll be able to put a green jacket on one day and have somebody drape that over you? And so, you know, from such a young age, working with that individual to then, we're playing in was it 2014? Very, very first one. It was like 2013, very first Masters. And very first one, and he's playing in I want to say the very last group on a Sunday, or last two groups on a Sunday, which is uncanny. I mean, you got this little 19, 20-year old doing that. And so I went to Augusta, worked that week, but then I actually had left Augusta to come back and do my deal because I had prepared the athlete, but because they were doing amazing on the Sunday, I was like, man, I gotta see this. And so legit gotta, hopped on someone's, jet and was able to get to Augusta in time. I missed the first three holes, and what's funny is, I'm running through. Well, you can't run in Augusta because, whoa, that's bad news. Fast walking through Augusta, and I'm rolling up to hole number 6, 7. I'm seeing this unbelievable picture of this par three, and it's an elevated tee. You're hitting it over this beautiful valley, and I just so happened to walk up on my athlete at that time, and the expansiveness of the crowd and the azaleas and the greenery and just the scope of holy Moses, dude, we're in contention for Augusta for the Masters right now. And, and it was just this quiet moment, my athlete had it, just absolutely peered at 3 feet to the pin. It was beautiful. And they, walk on down. And it was funny. I took this moment and I sat back on this, tree and just soaking this in. And, and it was, to come back to our conversation, it was like, okay, dude, this is a very powerful moment of a series of very small moments that no one will ever see. No one will ever appreciate the amount of work that has come to this. At that point, it was about 7 years of working with this guy, maybe 5 to 6 years of this moment where this kid is in contention for, the Masters. And to me, professionally, I was like, wait a minute, you played you weren't, the key player in the, but you played a very pivotal role in this moment that is unbelievably beautiful. And so I sat back and I go, all right, how can we use that same thought process of building belief systems? And listen, like you've known me, is I want to see the best in everybody, man. I see someone, I'm like, good gosh, your capacity is so big if you just had the
Yeah.
realization. And I mean, it's just from, this life thing is so freaking short that far be it for us to just fumble around with it and
Mhm.
not realize our capacity. And, I think, we're given a gift to be on here and is it this simple thing of just, hey man, just leading with love and in literally everything you're doing because I see an individual and I see their capacity and I see what they can become. I mean, even if it's a like I want you to be the best version of
Yeah.
you in every capacity, because I believe it. I see it in
Yeah.
individuals, and it's I just take that. It was literally I try to, and it's innate maybe with every relationship I have is like even if you're just an absolute turd ball, I'm like, man.
God, you have developer. It's so bad. Your developer is so intense.
It's
You could
crazy.
be a non-turd ball if we could just do three things.
I know. Let's keep it really simple. But that's the thing is like I see just absolute turd balls. I'm like, oh yeah, the capacity to be so good and actually makes an
Mhm.
impact, man. And that's what I believe.
Yeah.
And that's my operating mechanism. Even with my top guys, like I actually see you at Wimbledon. I actually see you hoisting these massive trophies. I actually see, I see you doing these big things. And maybe it's just like just as simple as just I love that they entrust me with that capacity to give them the tools, but I think it's something different where I want to say it is like you to hold that trophy. And I need to
Mhm.
instill that belief system in you as much as possible in order to get there. And that's how I operate, man. Even with my, own personal stuff is like
Yeah.
it's like me to love my two sons as much as possible and believe in them. It's like me to, love Mackenzie as much as possible. And I see so much in her as she's making so much of an impact. And you and I's relationship. I mean,
Yeah.
I see the big things you're doing, and I'm like, man, I want Michael's message to get out to the world, and it's a funny operating mechanism, and it's definitely not a naivety because I really believe actually
Yeah.
people have capacity to do bigger things.
Yeah. And that's what's so genius is that I'll say this because one, the moment you're describing in Augusta, I think, and for developers who are out there watching, that's what I think you mean navigating too, is that I think too often you never believe the teacher who never gets to see the kid cure cancer, the coach who never gets to see the athlete hold the trophy.
Yeah,
I think for yourself, you need to keep going. I want to put myself in positions where I can be an instrument of growth for people and situations that I care about. Make
yeah,
decisions based on that. At the same, in the midst of that, I think wanting that. So commitment to growth. But the other thing is, it is not free. This is not naivete. Developers, the vulnerability you talk about, Damon, which I think is absolutely true. Adam Grant and Renee Brown right now are still back in the vulnerability, having conversations about vulnerability, which is terrific again. Developers spend a lot of time pouring into people, knowing they believe a situation can be better even more than the people they're pouring into. You guys get left in situations. Developers will tell me, and I'm like, it's part of the price of admission. I stayed too long. I believed too hard. Man, it costs developers to go again. It costs developers to step in and go, but it didn't work the last 20 times. And as we get older, to find the courage to be vulnerable and say, I'm going to bet on you again. I'm going to bet on our relationship. I'm going to be a better father tomorrow. I'm going to be a better man, a better friend. But it didn't work. Developers, this is what I love about your belief in developers. It anchors that. But I also know you're right to say it is not naivete, because developers they learn it costly, but it's a gift to go, I still paid the price for belief that people and situations can grow, and I choose to keep believing every day.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off of that is once you've had that realization, I mean, there's definitely some moments where I'm like, woof, that cost a lot. And, it actually did cost a lot.
Finance and personal.
But to piggyback off of that is once you kind of gone through that, then all of a sudden, your standards for that belief system get a lot higher and a lot more rigid as well. And so even for yourself, right? And so now you reestablish your own standard, and then that expectation level for that, that next event, next individual to work with, those standards become higher. And then all of a sudden, now that elevating mechanism for both, it becomes just so much better, especially when, as a developer, I mean, that innate belief system in individuals is great. It does come at a cost. After a few times that you really kind of hit your toe on the couch quite a bit, then all of a sudden you go, maybe, just maybe, let's move the couch a little bit. But I'm still going to believe in the best in individuals, because that's just my operating mechanism. But really, I need to actually flip the mirror back on myself. I need to believe in the best for me and what I see myself down the road and down in the future. What's really fun is when you reestablish that standard for yourself, then the expectations get really flipped and go, this is really cool. Now we have an elevated expectation on all levels because you experienced, some of those kick in the pants, which I love those kick in the pants. I mean, they
It's a good
defined
learner
who I
moment for
am.
you. I learned something. That's good.
Dude,
It's all
I mean,
bonus.
yeah. And it sucks when you go through it, but dude, I'm telling you, you go through it. And then, once again, maybe this is the sucker for punishment, is like, far be it for me to go through weird stuff like that. But you know what? I went through some weird stuff like that. Maybe, just maybe, so I can potentially help somebody else avoid that. And so, hey, give me that weight to put on my shoulders. I'm okay with that, because then it starts to build the capacity for me to relate, so.
Yeah. As we one last question is going to bring it in for landings. I want to drop it at a certain place. Like a number of things you said so far to me already. Like I love your compensatory actions that you're trying to get through a moment with have a stale date. I think, again, that's a big one for me, is that I think in general it applies to all of us, that there's things that we do to kind of get through, that we tolerate, that they have a stale date. They will stop working one day. So so one, be clear, don't just try to compensate, but also know there's a timeline. I think also this shift in believing in the fundamentals. When I work with people on Clifton Strengths, I say a good understanding of strength is like a dashboard on your car. If your life is in the vehicle of like your job and your career and relationships, our vehicle's taking you through life. What you choose to put on that dashboard usually ties into our strengths. So, different things. And you can have different parts where you're like saying, I'm going to do a road trip, but seeing, oh, wait, my tank is on empty. There's things you should do before you take the road trip versus having a full tank. Now, there was a weird window of time in the 90s where they would put a check engine light for tire pressure. Remember that? Where you'd have a check engine light on your dash in your Suburban. And the answer was the sensor in the tire was bad. And you're like, and it's like an idiot light. It doesn't tell you anything, right? I feel like in a world of nonstop information, we have way too many dials and lights, and we don't know what they mean anymore. But you
Right.
work with, at the fundamental, you're working with people, executives who come to you because they want the fundamentals you're putting in your high performing athletes in the midst. But even for them or for yourself, if you're going, you know what? And again, these are different for everybody. Like I hear your themes. I'm like, intellection, input, they need to be learning. They need time to think. They need new information, people to believe in. What are things that, if not for yourself or for your clients, you're like, I encourage people in their life to have, these are some fundamentals that they should have, like dials on a dashboard, that if these pinging these things, these 4 things, these are areas that will let you know where you are before you make the decisions of getting on the road or not.
Yeah. Man, I love that question, and I'm going to keep it really simple. And I think I alluded to it a little bit earlier of being, one or two dimensional individuals, and something I encourage my athletes to do. And they're very broad, broad lights on the dashboard, but I think they're very powerful. Um, and I'll boil it down to, you know, did I take care of my body today? And what does that look like? Is it actually working out and sweating, or did I actually do recovery work? Go to the sauna, do some meditation, whatever it may be. Did I do something to take care of my physical body? Right? Did I potentially send, and then so that's a good body category. And then, I'll go more on like, some people will either call it faith based or being based, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But honestly, I'll call it gratitude is like, I think this is a really cool thing, even for athletes to do is did I send someone a thank you text or something that, I dwell in gratitude for that day? Did I actually, kind of realize, walking out, this is really cool. I got a golf course in the back. And so, I love just sitting in the backyard here and just going, man, this is a really cool gratitude moment because I'm in a space where it's a beautiful space. I actually get to see a golf course where, it's just a lot of gratitude. But then the people that helped get me there, did I actually thank them? That's paramount. And so the, and having a moment to actually meditate and actually realize something's bigger than myself. But I always use a checkpoint of family as well as, families can be different for literally everyone. It doesn't have to be partner,
It's
spouse. You
relationships.
don't have to get,
Important.
it's relationships. Is how have I fostered my friendships, family? And then, the last piece of that is really, what did I learn today? Or have I actively learned? Meaning, I never want to get stale in my intellectual process. Did I learn something new today that then I can apply in new ways with my clients or my entire business strategies or whatever it may be? And it's got to be something that actually challenges you, right? And I mean, heck, for some people, it might be learning a new language. It might not even have context to it. But I encourage athletes to really kind of hit a little bit of those 4 facets of, their body, understanding, gratitude, leading with gratitude. Have I touched the rock with my friends, family today as well, and honored that, fostered that, and did I really learn something new today? And those are broad, right? But those are my dashboards. And if I look at that and I go, man, I kind of hit every one of those points today, lo and behold, I have to reflect at the end of the day and go, "Huh, that was actually a pretty cool day." Why? Because I actually hit every dimension that I need to in order to operate as a functioning, awesome human being. And so that's my simple dashboard. And there's a lot of complexities to it. But if I do that consistently, dude, then all of a sudden I realize 6 months from now, I'm like, "Whoa, wait a minute. I learned blank, 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 but I've got an amazing relationship with my friends, family, and oh, wait a minute, I've actually been to my kids' games. That's cool." And then I'm feeling great. And then I've already touched base with a bunch of people that I'm, grateful for. The byproduct, then you go, wait a minute, I got to look at my numbers from the business standpoint. Weird. We just had a monumental quarter, 2 quarters. Wait a minute, is that because I've actually just taken care of the simple things, and the simple things take care of the very complex issues, right? And so that's where it leads us back to that thought process is like, how do I get prepared for that event that day? do the very simple things on a very consistent basis, and then you're going to perform because that expectation of I've already done the simple things very well. Now I show up for my decision making where I'm just executing because I've done the simple stuff.
Yeah. And I really think that those 4 core pieces, right? Take care of your body. Gratitude, we talk about, MIT talks about in a study that when we make gratitude lists, I think Katie Zafaris, the Olympic triathlete, used to say she does 9 every morning because it instantly turns off the self-consciousness part of her brain and
Mhm.
puts her in the taking care of your body, gratitude, awareness practices. Am I learning? Which is a commitment to growing. Be like, I want to get here. I'm like, why not just have a commitment to being in a posture of growth,
Yeah.
of taking action, recognizing we don't live in this world alone and can't. Like the relationship,
Right.
those 4 beats, I think, end up being critical. And in fact, my gratitude act is I remember, I do what I do now. I remember talking at Bradley High School in Cleveland, Tennessee. Was it Bradley we went to?
Yeah.
One very early morning. And you and I doing student athlete talks in an assembly. And I probably told some Derek Redmond story I heard from T-Bar Sports Camp that was from the
Right.
previous year, about Derek Redmond ripping his hamstring and his father taking care of him, the British decathlon or whatever runner. And I remember you telling me on the drive back, Mike, you're a good storyteller.
Mhm.
And for a guy whose whole life had been told he talks too much, it was pretty transformational for me. And I now, 20 years of standing on stages and talking to athletes and world leaders and businesses, I'm like, that mattered. And so that developer belief part of you 30 years ago got us here. So I wanted to say
Yeah.
thank you as my gratitude moment for the
Uh,
day.
hey, I've seen it from day one, buddy. And then, yeah, whether someone can, and that's the thing, man, see it 2 different ways. See somebody that talks too much or somebody that has the capacity to tapestry a really cool story. You've had a gift from day one to do that. So I'm extremely grateful for you too, dude.
And I just appreciate you. Thanks for giving me your time, and we'll talk again. And if you're following along at home, every time, all 20 of you that listen to this podcast, I love you. I'm just kidding. There's more than you that, but not that much anymore. One, honestly matters a lot. If you could like, follow, share, top 5, all that stuff like that. Comments are great. We'd love to hear from you more. We got some really fun episodes coming, but sharing, if you want, actually, and we do a thing called the Clarity Compass, which is 5 questions to ask if you're on track. Shoot us a note here. We'll send you that. It's a good way to start to ping, wait, where am I? And that can be a good dashboard to start. But again, Damon, thanks for your time today. Appreciate you. See y'all
Absolutely,
next
bud.
time. Thanks, brother.
Cheers.
Cheers.